Good evening, gentlemen. I'm really glad to present this case. This is one of the most interesting case which we had during one of our most busy emergency days, and obviously the non-COVID times. It was actually daytime, almost mid-evening, around 5 p.m. when we had a boy who was 21-year-old, brought by the attendants. He was pre-morbidly held in. He went to the washroom at 2:30 p.m. and passed out. There were also no family history to note as such. He was an engineering graduate and had just come to Delhi to visit his brother 2 days ago on 1st of February. He was apparently well till he had a sudden loss of consciousness, which resulted to a fall in the washroom on 3rd. He was brought into the emergency in drowsy state. Vitals were 70 systolic with saturation of 92% on room air, heart rate being tachycardic, 130 beats per minute, with respiratory rate being almost 22 breaths per minute. His sugars were 98 and he was afebrile. He was resuscitated initially with fluids, and we could not get any other significant history or positive finding on examination. So here we had a young patient with no comorbidities in with a short history in hypotension, hypoxia, and tachycardia. We did an ECG which just showed sinus tachycardia with GRBS of 98 milligram per DL and blood gas showing type 1 respiratory failure with metabolic acidosis. As of now, thoughts in our mind: 21-year-old, absolutely normal, pre-morbid, nothing going on, a college going kid had just come to Delhi. Most likely and most certainly, what comes to our mind is intoxication. At this point of time, we were thinking that what drug would have caused it or what drug history can be elicit. We kept digging it until we got the urine toxicological drug panel 9 report, and it turned out to be negative. At this point of time, we were baffled. We did a bedside echo because he had persistent hypotension, and bedside echo revealed that he had a dilated right atrium, right ventricle with severe PAH. His pulmonary artery pressures were 70. No obvious free floating clot was noted. This is the point the suspicion actually turned to pulmonary embolism. So we had a red herring here, being a young generation kid with no significant comorbidities or history finding. We had a low suspicion of P initially, which turned out to be P. So there are risk stratification clinical scoring. If I go by that, his modified Wells was 4.5 and per criteria was 3. Clinical examination, no significant finding other than the CRT being around 6 seconds. Point of care investigation which we did was for EKG, is 2D echo, chest X-ray, blood gas. Lab tests, including urine tox screen, was sent, and the whole thrombophilia profile was sent prior to anticoagulating the patient. After stabilizing the patient, we did get a CT PA for the patient, and this is what we saw. So there was a massive embolism which was actually sitting on and right on face of us. Okay. Scores and risk stratification to aid the diagnosis of pulmonary embolism is very important in emergency. We have certain scores as per the PIOPET trial 2, in which per criteria, modified Wells score, Geneva score for pulmonary embolism, and PESI to estimate the severity index is very important. Per criteria is pulmonary embolism rule out criteria. Basically, we use this in patients where we have a very low suspicion. So, age of 50 years, less than 50 years, pulse rate of less than 100, saturation of more than 94%, no hemoptysis, no exogenous estrogen history or in females, no previous DVT or pulmonary embolism, no surgery or trauma within prior 4 months, or no unilateral leg swelling. Gives us a fair idea for a rule out diagnosis. For the modified Wells criteria, we have to look for the clinical signs and symptoms of deep vein thrombosis. If it is present, we score them around 3. No alternative diagnosis is 3 again. Heart rate more than 100, immobilization for more than 3 days, or surgery in prior 4 weeks is 1.5 with previous DVT or PE. Hemoptysis, 1. Malignancy and active treatment, we give another score. We say that the pulmonary embolism is unlikely if the score is less than or equal to 4, and it's more likely if the score is more than 4. Revised Geneva score is another scoring system which is available, and it again takes into consideration of few similar points, which is age, previous DVT or pulmonary embolism, surgery or fracture, active cancer, unilateral leg swelling with hemoptysis, tachycardia, pain on leg palpation. That's another point which they have added. The probability depends. If it is less than 3, the probability is really low. And if the points is more than 11, then it is 74%, which is pretty high probability. Pulmonary embolism severity index is used to identify the outcome of the patient. Age more than one per year, male sex, cancer, heart failure, chronic lung disease, heart rate more than 110 beats per minute, systolic blood pressure less than 100, with respiratory rate, body temperature, and saturations being low. The higher the score it is, the chances are that the patient belongs to the high risk category, which includes more than 105 points, which should be coming in total. In emergency, the main management consists of airway breathing, maintaining airway breathing circulation, and stabilizing the patient's vitals and hemodynamics. Anticoagulation should be considered an emergency, either IV heparin or subcu. And in case the P is high, the pulmonary embolism is massive, we should be considering thrombolysis. Pulmonary embolism is relatively common cardiovascular disorder with relatively high mortality rate, despite of the advances in treatment in past 30 years. It is mainly caused by the obstruction of the pulmonary arteries by the thrombus, tumor, fat, or air. High degree of suspicion is based on clinical prerequisition as the prerequisite for the patient. Higher is the suspicion, higher is the chances that patient will survive. Massive pulmonary embolism, the types of PE is massive or submassive. Massive with an obstructive shock of SPP less than 90, and submassive when there is acute PE without systemic hypotension, either with RV dysfunctional or myocardial necrosis. When the patient presents with submassive PE, most likely we can go ahead with the heparin or subcutaneous heparin therapy, but massive PE needs to be thrombolized. Main pathophysiology is deep vein thrombosis is mainly from the large vein coming to the inferior vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, causing the pulmonary embolism. Ventilation perfusion mismatch leading to hypoxia, and decreased venous return leading to right heart failure and shock. Management, again, to stabilize the vitals, we need to take care of the we might require an inotropic support. Supportive management has to be continued, and we have to consider thrombolysis. How to give it? That's another question which we all have. Tenecteplase versus altiplase is what comes to our mind. There are studies which have shown altiplase to be having better benefit. The dosage which we give is for more than 65 kg, 10 milligram bolus, 90 milligram followed over next 2 hours. Okay. And the dose adjustment is required for less than 65 kg weight will be not to exceed for more than 1.5 milligram per kg. We can start heparin infusion. The low molecular weight we do give, the efficacy is still unknown. Tenecteplase, as per the PEHI-2 trial, that is pulmonary embolism thrombolysis trial, they had actually given tenecteplase versus placebo for the intermediate risk of pulmonary embolism for around 1,005 patients. They tried to identify death or hemodynamic compromise, and they found that there was a difference of 2.6% versus 5.6% in placebo, where there was a major extracranial bleeding, which was on the higher side, 6.3% versus 1.2%. Obviously, they have received the tenecteplase, and the intracranial bleeding was around 2% as compared to the placebo. But there is no trial assay done for the tenecteplase versus altiplase till date. The drug of choice still remains altiplase for now. So this is how this patient was managed in emergency, and then the patient was handed over to the cardiologist. The cardiologists were involved from the beginning, and from here on, the respiratory physician's reference was also given for the patient, and the disposition was done to the cath lab for the patient.
Thank you, Dr. Divya. Now,
Thank you, sir.
requesting Dr. Kanwar, who is the most terrific pulmonologist, and right now he agreed to come in spite of his very busy schedule with managing COVID patients. Dr. Kanwar, there.